So this was fun every night. Yeah, there wasn't an issue with substance abuse. There wasn't an issue with other overinflamed egos. It was, they knew that this was a business. They know this is a business for them, and they treated it as such. And we had fun with it every night. The way we operated was family, and that edict came from the band down. Much like I hear now Live Nation is taking care of you all. If you're in distress of any kind, they're there for you. That's family. We are family. The whole part of this business that makes it so inspiring for me is to come back and see Tex after how many years. He's family to me. Live Nation is family to me. Warner Brothers is family. This band created a family, and it wasn't just the 6 of them. That was the principal. But it was their management team, it was their record label, it was the touring crew, it was everybody we saw in every local city. And I'm sure if you spoke to some of the promoters we were lucky enough to do shows with, you would hear the same sort of stories. That, man, that was a real treat to have them in here. They behaved like family, they treated us like family. And that's a really nice space to be in. And I questioned in the aftermath of what's happened, you know, the family part of it has made it super hard. So was it a right decision for the crew, for instance, to be the family? Because we were just as devastated as most everybody else because we were so tight-knit. We weren't of the sometimes typical disposable crew model, which would have made it easier possibly, where we weren't as connected to the artist or as connected to the thing. But in this case, we were family. And as it turns out, even though I questioned that, I'm glad that we had it as family, because that meant that everybody was making the phone calls. Everybody was looking after each other. There's still 24 messages on my phone that I haven't listened to. I don't have the strength to listen to at this point in time, but it's definitely better to treat each other like family. And we are all, by and large, in the same family. We had our fun times, our funny times. That's me. Chester asked me to model the latest ladies' T-shirt that night. Much to my chagrin, I did, and even more much to my chagrin, Mike's wife, Anna, was there to take that picture. And this is part of the family as well. So Chester's there, Mike Shinoda on the end, Mike's wife, Anna, and Talinda, as you know. Everything about it was family, and that's part of what makes it hurt so bad.
Oh,
okay,
no.
So this video, this video, I want you to pay close attention to this video and see if you see anything out of the ordinary in this video.
Oh,
okay,
no.
And then,
oh, shit, burglar. What is this thing?
what do you guys have?
This is chocolate pudding or canned dog food. Let's hope for the best world. I just changed myself and I'm gonna die.
Oh, shit, the same thing.
Okay, just a
Oh, double
Three.
dog screw.
I either got rotten egg or something else.
3,
just-
2, 1, go.
It's the jelly bean challenge, which I know nothing about.
I got the cow. Oh, I got the cow in my mouth. Oh, my God. I want to drink gasoline or something else. That is fucking horrible.
Are you guys throwing up?
Oh, yeah. I can't. I don't think I could ever go down the cheese aisle again. That just.
Guys, we will reward ourselves by.
Has anybody done that? I haven't done it. Yeah? Is it really that bad? Okay, so anything out of the ordinary? Did anybody see anything at all aside from the Mona Lisa on the wall and the dog barking in the background out of the ordinary? Any signs of suicide? Looked like regular happy life? Less than 24 hours before he took his own life. That's when that was shot. Why is that important? You cannot see this coming. Those demons are in there. Some of us have them and we don't talk about them. We don't express it. We don't feel like we've got somebody we can talk to them about. You can't see them coming. I put this guy on stage for 15 years, looked him in the eyes every night, gave him a kiss before he went out there, and never in my life did I see this coming. He was in the best Chester we'd ever seen. Physically fit, vocally fit, outwardly spiritually fit. Our guard was down because it felt like he had it under control. He was talking about it in the press as though he had it under control. Our guard went down. You can't see this coming, which is why family is so important. It's why you have to talk to each other. It's why you have to lean in and say, how you doing? How's your family doing? Because mental health isn't just, I've got some demon from the past, or I'm potentially using illicit drugs or prescription drugs for that matter. It's, do I have a good, healthy relationship? Do I eat well? Do I have a good, healthy body? Am I doing all the things to empower myself to be healthy? We are all drug users, whether you want to admit it or not. When the house lights go off and you get chills and the audience applauds and you get chills and you get excited, you got to hit a dopamine from your body. It turns into cortisol. And your body's reacting to that, and you're a natural, body-created drug user in that regard. So what happens when you close the door and you go into a hotel room after you've had that stimulus all night long? Or you're in the bus. Those are the things we hope to talk about tonight, some ideas about how we can better lean in and take care of each other. I'm grateful that you all have given us this opportunity to share this story with you, and I hope that it helps. And with that, Joey, I'll let you take it back.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jim.
Yeah.
We're going to bring up our panel now. First up is a woman that I had my first conversation with the other day. A lady who does some incredible work. Her name is Dr. Barbara Van Dalen. Come on up, Barbara. She is the founder and president of givenhour.org. Next up, we have Talinda Bennington, who's Mrs. Talinda Bennington, a badass mom. She's a great mom and obviously a very strong woman. And Anna Shinoda, who's an author and a blogger, and of course married to Mike, the DJ from Lincoln Park. Welcome, ladies, if you want to say hello to the multi-instrumentalist from Lincoln Park, excuse me. So if you guys want to say hi to everybody, and these are all our Live Nation people, our Bell people, Warner people, and of course we have a live stream going right now. And let's welcome the ladies. Let's hear it for them. We're going to start off with Anna. You want to share something that you wrote, I read, and was very touching and moved me, and you want to share it with everybody?
Sure. Just to give everybody a little background, I'm an author and I write for young adults. And I've always found it easier for me to talk about my own mental health issues through my characters, because then I don't have to feel like anybody is judging me. And this summer, was it a month after Chester passed, that the band was all supposed to be out on tour. And suddenly we weren't, and we were all going to have our kids out with us. It was going to be almost kind of like a mini family vacation. And so we decided that since we can't be on tour together, that we would go to Hawaii. So we took all of our families to Hawaii and had a really good healing time there and a lot of really deep conversations. And on the flight back from that, I just had this thing in my brain of, okay, this wants to come out, so I'm just going to write it down, but I'm not going to do anything with it. There's no way that I'm going to publicly share this. But then I got home, and I sent it to a friend of mine and my husband, and they both said, no, you need to put this up. This is something that might help some people. So I'm going to go ahead and read that to you now, and I think it's also a good kind of bouncing off point for the rest of our conversation. I haven't talked publicly that much about my own mental health. I think in interviews when Learning Not to Drown came out, I may have touched briefly on being in therapy, but I've never gone into detail. I am open with my friends about it, but was always afraid of being judged publicly for having my brain. I applauded Chester, especially in the last few months before his death, for being so open in interviews. I was proud of him for being brave. I knew that by describing the way his brain worked, Chester would help others get beyond the stigma of mental health and addiction. I guess it's now my turn to be open. As someone who personally deals with depression and anxiety on a daily basis, I know how important it is to recognize the way my brain works and the things that help me. Personally, therapy has been the best thing for my brain, specifically EMDR and cognitive therapy. I've had the same psychologist for 14 years. There are times that I've needed her 5 days a week and times that I see her once every few months. For some people, medication will be what works best. For 1 year of my life, I was on medication to help lower my anxiety to a point that I could actually get through the therapy sessions and allow my brain to start making new, healthy connections. Some people may need medication for a short time, some may need it for life. It depends on the individual brain and how it works. For some people, alternative therapies might work best. For some people, books are helpful. For some people, group settings and support is what works best. I highly recommend Al-Anon or AANA for people dealing with addiction. It is free, provides group therapy provides therapy in a group setting and a community of support. For most people, it will take trying different options and maybe even mixing several of them. My initial healing took several years. Some of it was incredibly painful, but I'm so glad I stuck with it. The Anna that I am on a daily basis now feels true to me. I don't miss the deep depressive dives or the bursts of anger that could take over a whole day. I don't miss being afraid of emotions. I don't miss feeling out of control. I know now that the way my brain stays healthy involves exercise, vitamin D, creative outlets of writing and drawing, talking to trusted friends, sometimes acupuncture, seeing my therapist if I start to slip, and checking in with her monthly so we can recognize early signs when I may need a little more help. But here's what gets tricky. Taking care of mental health can feel embarrassing, and this is something we need to change, and it's something that everyone can contribute to. It can be expensive. This is another thing that needs to be changed. I don't know what the laws are like up here in Canada, but I know in the United States there's not really that many, there's not like, what would it be called?
Socialized healthcare.
Socialized medicine.
It's free here, but the lines are really long.
Good. And it can also take more than one try for you to find the right therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist or group for you. It takes work, and a sick brain may not want you to do the work. A sick brain may not want to deal with insurance or finding free resources. A sick brain may tell you that nothing will work for you. If you need help, please absolutely seek it out, and try again and try often if the first attempt towards mental health doesn't seem to work. Chester worked hard. He worked hard to be sober. He worked hard for happiness. I am eternally grateful for the years that were given to us because of the work he put in. We will never know what was happening in his final moments, but we do know that the only thing to blame is disease, addiction, mental illness. As a person who is in incredible pain at the loss of one of my best friends because of mental illness, I can assure you that you are important and needed in this world, and that you deserve mental health. Find a way that works for your brain. Dedicate yourself to working towards mental health. Most likely, it will not be a destination, but an ongoing journey. This is okay. The important thing is that you are on a journey and putting in the work one moment at a time. Slips can happen. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Admit it and get back on the path. Accept help. Be compassionate with yourself. One thing we can all do to help stop the stigma around mental illness and suicide is to look at our words. Words matter. When we say died by suicide instead of committed suicide, we focus on the illness rather than blaming the survivors or the deceased. The answer to why did somebody die by suicide is always mental illness. That is the reason. And if we can start there, we can move forward not only to prevent more suicides, but to help more people find mental health.
Thank you.
Joey, if I can jump in there. Anna, that's one of the things we saw immediately following our loss, our collective loss, was the other part of our family that I failed to mention is the fans. And how connected they are to the Lincoln Park, the ethos, the ecosystem, all of it. They just really, really have a connection that is greater than mine for Jimmy Buffett. You know, it's really important that they are in the communication with Lincoln Park. And what Talinda and Anna did in the immediate aftermath was nurture the loss in the fan base using social media. And, you know, it was a great fear of ours that someone may interpret Chester's actions or the demon's actions as permission to take the same. And I think part of the reason we didn't see that happen is because of you guys and the communication that you did and the genuine, heartfelt outreach in social media every time somebody tried to contact us. And I think you should be applauded for that.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Before we start the conversation, I'm just going to share a little bit of my story. I was born Giuseppe Scolari. I grew up as Pino Scolari. I somehow turned into Joey Vendetta, and then I ended up as Joey Scolari, which kind of explains why I'm so confused all the time. But I started off when I was young, got into music, started playing the bass. My Italian immigrant father said, "You don't think you're going to become a magician?" That's how he pronounced musician. I said, "No, Dad, I don't have a hat and there's no rabbits here." But, I got into radio and to Jim's point, there were a lot of dopamine highs, right? There was a lot of highs. I was in Toronto and got to work at Q107 and was a big DJ and hung out with rock stars and kind of got treated like a rock star a lot of the time, and then moved to LA and worked for Disney and then ended up working for Live Nation and went to everything. I got to go to everything, right? Very spoiled and grateful, never took it for granted, but just got to the point where just everything started to become mundane. And what happened to me was 15 months ago, I took a medication, an antibiotic that had side effects that I didn't read. And I took the fourth pill and all hell broke loose. And I had anxiety and really, really bad dark thoughts and depression and insomnia and symptoms of neuropathy in my legs and my knees. That's burning sensation, if you guys don't know what that is. And then I spent the next few months becoming a professional patient and going to acupuncture and reflexologists and changing my diet. And, I reached out to our employee assistance program, and it wasn't a lot of help, because I felt alone. And when I tried to explain how I felt to people, they didn't understand, or they just kind of look at you and go, "Oh, okay, well, I hope you're okay." And you have to figure it out yourself, to your point about it being a journey for yourself. But, 15 months later, I've become an expert, and I shared a list with Barbara here on things that you do right away. Stop drinking coffee. I've been sober for 12 years. I got my privileges revoked a long time ago. And so, don't do drugs, don't drink alcohol, don't drink coffee, shut your phone off a couple hours before you go to bed at minimum, exercise, do yoga, meditate. There's a whole list of things that you can do right away. But nobody handed me that list. That list didn't exist. I had to figure out the list for myself. I went to therapy, I tried medication, and for me, I'm Mr. Side Effect. I read the side effects, I take the medication, and 10 minutes later, every side effect on that list is happening to me. So medication doesn't work for me, but luckily I have amazing friends and resources, some of whom are in this room, specifically the Live Nation Canada people who were, incredible to me, and the Ticketmaster people who were great to me when I came here, but there were people who told me and explained what was happening. I saw a doctor who works with the NHL Players Association who explained rumination and the way your thoughts just go over and over and over. And basically, it's like these spiders in your brain just looking for all the bad stuff. So anytime, I have tons of good stuff in my life, but for some reason, everything's bad, right? But 15 months later, I feel 90% better because I did a bunch of work, and all these people who helped me see a psychiatrist, then I got a therapist, then I did CBT, and I started taking medical marijuana, CBD oil, which does work. If it's CBD, THC, don't take that. You'll start seeing weird stuff. You don't want to do that. So, but that's my story, and I ended up here today. I don't have anxiety sitting up here at all, right? I'm not depressed at all. But all those things that I used to find joy in, music and sports, there was no joy anymore. Everything was gone, and everything was bad. And everything that happened to me in my childhood and in my adulthood, every little thing was bad. Why didn't I do this? Why did I end up this way? Why did this happen? This is all my fault. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. All those things go through your head. And really quickly before I throw it over to you, Barbara, this morning I reached out to a gentleman who you may know, Bob McKenzie from TSN, who's a close friend. I said, "Hey, can you help me promote this live stream?" And when I called him, he was listening to Linkin Park. And he was thinking about the song he was listening to where Chester screams and the meaning of the lyrics and how he realized several years ago what those lyrics actually meant. So the moment I called him, the guy's listening to Linkin Park. He's like, "I can't believe you just called me right now." And he put a series of tweets up, and he's got 1.5 million followers explaining our conversation and everything. So there are things greater than us at work here. And as I said before to some other people, like, there is hope and you can be helped and you can come through this. You just have to do all the things, the work, as people say, right? And I'm the laziest guy in the world. I don't want to do any work anytime. But this was kind of like I had no choice. And so I figured most of it out, and it's definitely working. So, your organization, to the point of healthcare and not having resources, and in the U.S. especially where it's not socialized healthcare, explain what your organization does and how you impact people.
Sure. Well, thank you, Joey, and thank you for sharing your story, because I think that ultimately is what we're here to do, is to all recognize that these issues, challenges, they're part of being human. There isn't anyone in this room who hasn't experienced emotional suffering. It's impossible to get to the age we are and not have experienced pain. And we'll talk a lot more tonight about that, because that's really what it's all about. So my story is, I'm a psychologist. I'm a child psychologist. I grew up in rural California. Right after I was born, my mom had a psychotic break and was diagnosed as schizophrenic. My dad had served in World War II, so he came back with his own trauma, but he was an amazing daddy, and he was left with 3 little boys, a baby girl, and a psychotic wife. And so that was the beginning of his journey, and it was the beginning of mine. I lost a brother when I was 15. He drowned. Another trauma. We all have them. So it wasn't too surprising that I grew up to become a mental health professional, right? It's like I wanted to understand these things, and I wanted to understand myself. And I moved east. I grew up in California, moved east to Washington, D.C. I was there on 9/11, and thought, oh my gosh, not only is our world changed, but there are going to be a lot of people who are traumatized because we're going to war. I knew it was happening, and that's, in fact, our country, your country, and allies. But as as Anna mentioned, and as Joey referenced, finding care isn't always easy. And so my organization that I founded then provides free mental health care to populations in need. We started with military and veterans. We have great conversations going on with Canada, because even though you have a system, that doesn't mean that everybody can get care when they need it. So there's all kinds of pieces of that. I worked very closely with the Obama administration, and it was there that we launched the campaign to change direction. You all in your bags have these cool cards that are Know the 5 Signs and Recognize the Healthy Habits. Joey and I were talking about healthy habits. And that's how I met Talinda, because that work that we launched 3 years ago, we realized we can keep creating new programs, which we are and do. We can keep giving services, which we are and we will continue. But if we don't change the culture, so that everyone recognizes what all of us in this room, and certainly all of us up here know, that this is a part of life. It's where you come from. It's what's happened to you. It's your genetic material. That then results in how it looks, or how much pain, or how much rumination, or the suicidal ideation that haunts you in the middle of the night, etc. It's eating disorders, substance abuse. It's part of life. And so if we can talk about it and we can say, hey, rumination, what really helped for me? Meditation. Man, it was really hard in the beginning, but then it really helped me get centered and calm, or swimming, or gardening, or writing. So that's how I had the good fortune to meet Talinda, because Talinda, and I'll let her talk about her own journey, but she was searching for a place and a way to take her passion and her pain to help others. And I'm just blessed that you found me and that we fit together, and now we're doing this together. We are going to change the culture with so many of our friends here and all of you. So that's me.
Thank you. Talinda, you want to talk a little bit about your background and your organization and some of the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, first of all, for taking time and being here. You are part of the change. You are part of the tipping point. Please don't forget that. We all need each other, and we can't do this alone. So the more you know, the more you'll spread your knowledge, and so on and so forth. And I'm deeply grateful for that. So My background is I grew up from very humble beginnings. Put myself through college, graduated with a degree, an undergrad degree in veterinary medicine, total science nerd over here. And I was just kind of having fun in my 20s. I was a long-term substitute teacher. I moved to New York on a whim. My friend called me to a party, and that's how I met the love of my life. And I met Chester, and from the day we met, we were never apart. We were both very emotionally unhealthy in our own different ways. And over our time together, we were together for 12 and a half years, we both grew. He struggled with addiction and depression, two things that I have never struggled with. Although I do have my own demons, I did have my hardships growing up, we just handled them in very different ways. So I came from a point of complete, for lack of a better term, ignorance to a situation. But over time, I came to learn that taking care of your mental health is, as I said before, as important as taking care as your physical health. When Chester died, it was a complete surprise. My husband had in the past, he had attempted suicide. But, I thought to myself, it was because he was wasted. He was, this or that. And, so when he did pass, I thought, very naively, I thought we were in the clear. We had a very dear friend, Chris Cornell, take his own life. And I felt that, okay, Chester sees, what Vicki and the kids, were godparents to their children, what they're going through, and this will never happen. So we went on a family trip to our cabin. That's the video that Jim showed you. My husband was full of life. He had to go back home early to work. He was very excited to be promoting the new album and doing stuff. So he was happy. Gave me a kiss goodbye, gave the kids a kiss goodbye, and I never saw him again. The phone call I received that next morning was life-altering. My children's lives were altered forever. And in the travel time, which felt like 1,000 years to get from Sedona back home, I knew that I had to walk into the home where my husband took his life, and I had to normalize that for my children because they were going to respond to how I reacted. I walked into that house, and I walked up to the room that it happened in. I made my peace with it, and then I made it as normal as I can. And that was the beginning of my journey of doing what I can do to normalize mental health, to normalize it's not always okay. My children have been my driving force because one day my grandchildren are gonna look back and they're gonna know their grandfather's life, which, by the way, I don't have grandchildren yet. I'm very hopeful. With as many kids as we have, though, it's bound to happen. But I was thinking, when they look back and they think about their grandfather, his life speaks for itself. I think we can all agree on that. His life has touched us in so many ways, many different ways. His voice is the sound of a generation, and he is a legend, and that will never die. And I thought, his death needs to do the same. He can't be another rock star gone bad. Tragic. That can't be why. His death has to be the tipping point, has to show people we could seem so normal, so okay, and then not be okay in an instant. I will share with you, the night my husband took his life, or the early morning, he had been sober for almost 6 months, which was amazing for him. he had a lot of shame in the past when he had relapsed. Shame that he had just begun to share with me in the couple months before he died. Shame I didn't even know a person could have. So when he passed, and I learned that there were 2 empty beer bottles in the room, I knew he had relapsed. But I also knew he wasn't so intoxicated, out of his mind, like I would have thought. I knew instantly that drink triggered that shame, triggered a lifetime of unhealthy neural pathways. And this is what I want to get through to as many as I can. It is so important that we take care of our mental health. If you have children, speak to them about taking care of your emotions. Put words to their feelings. They go to school, they go to PE, they learn their cardiovascular health, they dissect animals when they're older. But for the most part, they don't know words for how they're feeling. Bullying, especially with social media nowadays, the need to teach our children how to cope is so important. And my husband didn't have that. He suffered from depression as a child, and it was untreated. He had traumas throughout his childhood, which many of us have. I have myself. But the way his pathways kept going, they just kept going towards disaster. And by the time he died, it was so much work. I believe, as Mike said, it was so much work for him to just do normal stuff, to be happy. I wish I would have realized this sooner. I'm not saying I could have saved him. Only he could have done that. And I will share with you, our 11-year-old son, Tyler, he suffers from depression. It was diagnosed through an ADD evaluation with a therapist a couple of years ago. He had markers, and we talked about it in our family. He's never experienced shame with it. And to this day, this week, he has Yellow Ribbon Week, which is a National Suicide Prevention Week. And my son is in 6th grade making a speech to his school about that, about being a kid that's diagnosed with clinical depression, but not having shame for it. And that's something I would like to pass to you, is there is no shame in not being okay. And with 320, when I thought of 320, and I thought I wanted my husband's death to carry on in such importance, in the same amount of importance as his life did, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a universal phone number? Just in the States, we have 411. You could call for information for where the nearest grocery store is at. Of course, there's 911. And I thought there should be a number for us to call, one universal number. We can call, we're connected with an operator that can guide us to proper resources for whatever we need, whether it's a question about your health insurance and who to go to, or if you need to speak with somebody, or if you need to find an AA meeting, or if you need to find a peer group or an Al-Anon group, whatever it may be. I was on many conference calls after Chester had passed with Whitney Schaller. She's from Music for Relief, amazing woman. She coordinated these calls for me to kind of see where I could fit in. And I quickly realized that I didn't need to reinvent the wheel. I needed to just streamline it. And then I got on the phone with Dr. Barbara, who was the first person that understood my goal to a T. And that's how we created 320 Changes Direction, that I'm very proud of. And that is my life's work. So,
You know what I just realized? we had that phone call. I was here in Toronto.
Whoa, that's funny.
For Invictus.
That's
and we
funny,
talked.
yeah.
You were in LA and I was here. So
Yeah.
you guys see Toronto.
There you go. There you go. And there was a moment, I don't know if any of you have had those aha moments when you've met somebody or connected with somebody and you feel like you've known them forever. They get you. That's how it was for Dr. Barbara and I. That's how it was for my husband and I. Anna and I. Jim, not so much. I'm just kidding. I just kidding.
Whatever.
No, I love you so much. So this is how we are all connected up here on stage, and we're moving forward. We're moving fast. We're moving with fury. And every person in this room tonight, everybody watching live stream, you're all part of this movement. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Barbara, I want to talk about, you touched upon, Talinda, about neurons and like brain chemistry, not to get too technical, but can you talk a little bit about how people's brain chemistry differs from one person to the next? And I know for myself, I got into patterns, and some of the therapists that I saw said you have to retrain your brain, which is what I've been doing. So instead of going, it was easy for me to always go negative because I'd kind of burned a pathway in my brain on the negative side. So I had to retrain it. And every time I started thinking negatively, I kind of argued with myself. I became an internal lawyer, and I was basically arguing with myself when I'd say something negative. I said, "Well, that's not true. What are you talking about? Look at this." And when you keep doing that, and when you meditate, I meditate every day. It's amazing. Your brain actually does change.
Absolutely. And I wish we could say that we know everything about how our brains function. We don't. Just don't ever let anybody tell you out there, any provider, any healer, anyone. We don't. But we know some things. And we know, for example, when children have injuries to the brain, that the brain will rewire itself and they can recover very quickly because they're still growing and developing. And even though, it's hard to teach old dogs new tricks, we can change our brain patterns, the way that the direction we tend to go in our thinking, the negative. And different things work for different people. For some people, meditation is a gift. For others, they can't. It just doesn't work for them. And as Anna said, for some people, medication can help you tolerate what you need to look at. Talinda and I were talking about trauma and when you've experienced trauma. And my guess is a lot of us in this room have experienced trauma. And then when something triggers that trauma, what is that? It could be a sound, it could be a smell, it could be a taste. It's like you're thrown against the wall as if it's happening now. What is that? That's our brain. That's how we process information. That's the painful processing. Trauma can make you block out memories, experiences. It can also make it as if they're happening more powerful almost than when you experience them. But that also tells us how much hope there is that our brains can be channeled, trained, new pathways, but it's work. There is no pill that does that. There are pills that help you tolerate. It can help sort of your brain process because of the neurotransmitters and sort of the biochemical piece. Sometimes those medications can help you sleep. Lord, we need to sleep. And if you can't sleep, it puts you in a very scary, dark place where those ruminations and all that gets worse and bad. So medication can be incredibly helpful, but you still need to do the work. You need to practice the healthy habits, whatever those are for you. On those cards that you'll find, there are ones that we came up with, basic ones. Joey came up with a whole list, and there you'll see there's a lot of similarity. You need to recognize when you're in trouble, when you're hurting, when you're spiraling, when things are going on. You know them. And if you don't, you can tune in to learn them. So our brains are amazing. They can be our friends. They can be our enemies.
I just wanted to, can I jump off on that? One thing that my therapist told me kind of early on is, that part of your brain that goes into that trigger and goes into that place when something happens, that part of your brain was very important to protect you for a very long time. I grew up in a household, there were 7 children. One of my brothers is a violent criminal. He is a sex offender. And some of the things that I experienced growing up, my brain found ways to make sure that I was protected for many, many years. So it's a good thing that your brain does that at the time of when the traumas happen. But then when it's no longer serving you, you really do need to try and make those new connections.
I think it's important too, Barbara, to acknowledge that when you say a childhood brain trauma, we're not talking about just being hit on the head. We're talking about a traumatic event
Absolutely.
that messed with your psyche at the
Absolutely.
same time, right?
Absolutely. And in both directions. You know, children, as we know, if we don't help them process, I mean, Talinda, what she's saying about, you know, we need to teach our kids and talk to them in the way we talk to them. I always say this, we teach our kids about sex, we teach them about drugs, we teach them about be careful when you cross the street, but we don't generally talk to them about these things, labeling what's going on, helping them identify. And children's brains, they're so plastic that if they're traumatized and we don't help them, that can create those locks and those barriers, but they can also be amazingly resilient. And we can help them grow. And sometimes those children, we still all have the child part in us that was hurt. And sometimes we need to help ourselves heal that part of us, the part that was hurt when we were children.
We're going to have time for questions, so think of some questions that you'd like to ask. But Jim, I want to talk to you a little bit about, we talked about this when we were preparing for this. You know, I learned another couple of terms when I went through the worst part of what I did was adrenal glands and cortisol, which were terms that I was not familiar with until I got hit by this thing that I never thought I'd get hit by. And the entertainment business and all businesses now, right? The pressure's on. You're always on your phone. You always feel like you have to be on. You always feel like you have to answer. If somebody texts you and you don't reply, you're like, oh my God, I didn't reply. You know, you were the road manager for 16 years. It's a business that's got a lot of stress. There's a lot of risk, not just financial. You're putting 17,000 people into a venue. There's security considerations. There's rigging going up. There's load in. There's load. All things that fans don't think about. And they come in and raise their hands in the air like our logo and experience the joy. But there are all these people that work in the music business behind the scenes that are on a bus. They're getting into a hotel room at 3 o'clock in the morning if they even get a hotel room. They have to sleep on the bus. They have to drive all these distances. I'm not trying to say that we need to feel sorry for anybody, but this is a very unique industry.
It is a unique industry, and I don't know that this self-induced cortisol hit or dopamine hit is unique to it's certainly not unique to our industry. What is unique is that we're experiencing it as part of our everyday life, right? The house lights go off, as I said earlier, and you get that rush, and the audience applauds, and you get that rush, and you know they call you back out for an encore, and you get that rush. Well, if you're the artist, that's energy going directly into you, and that's really, you're thriving on that. That's why you stand on that stage every night, to communicate a message and to get that rush from the audience. And I think unassisted, I'm no doctor, but unassisted, that's a dopamine hit, dopamine hit, dopamine hit. And then that trails into a cortisol stimulation and then an adrenaline stimulation. And so your body's already getting fired up. And you don't necessarily need drugs to get you there because your body's doing it. So what happens when the lights go out and you're in the bus bunk, or you know, if you're the crew? Because the crew, I still get chills every time the house lights go off. That's why I love the business. What's our coping mechanism for that? Well, right now we climb into the bus, we drink a whole bunch of beer, eat a bunch of pizza at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then crawl into a bunk and pass out. Well, that's probably not the best thing to do. More than likely it's not. But it's to, you know, you're coming off the stage with this huge, huge high. Now you're going to the lowest of lows in a dark hotel room, nothing. So often that stimulus that you're getting naturally turns into an added usage of something to recreate the stimulus you got during the show day. And I don't think I don't know of anyone else who's ever said that out loud to us as a tribe, that, you know, listen, let's acknowledge it. We're on a rush. And maybe one of the reasons we go out and booze it up after a show or whatever your wind down might be is because we're looking to replicate the rush we had on stage. We're working behind the stage. And that's now complicated by the phone, as you alluded to. You know, now my daughter's 5.5 years old, and both she and my 9-year-old son are on their iPad, playing games on their iPad. Well, they're getting this dopamine response as a result of being on the phone, or I got another like, or I just scored big in the football game on my iPad. That's all dopamine. And we don't know where that's going to take our children, but I can guarantee you it's not going to be any place great. And I think originally our bodies were getting dopamine from things that were healthy for us, chasing down the next meal, physically active. And before the phones, we were engaged, and we were creating dopamine in a way that the body's natural response to it, the wind down, the exhaustion, and all the rest, worked in our favor, and it didn't point us in a direction of, I got to have my next hit of dopamine. So I think we're in a really difficult time right now, and our children are in an extremely difficult time because we're overstimulated. And we're overstimulated in ways that the body's natural recourse for it doesn't exist. The natural things that our body did to expel the adrenaline and expel the cortisol, we're not servicing those needs. We're only servicing the high. And that's, I think, partially why we're seeing such a traumatic turn in suicide and suicide ideation and these other problems. And we have to look out for each other, and we have to acknowledge it. And we have to talk about it. That's why we're here.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I think about how hard Chester worked. And after every album, he had the pressure to do better than he did before. I can't even begin to imagine carrying that burden, that stress. But all of you as professionals or parents or friends, I believe it's safe to assume you typically do your best at what you do. And when things get hard, you work at it. You work to do better. But there's this thing that when it comes to ourselves, when things get hard emotionally, we tend to want to think of it as a weakness. And I'm here to tell you, it's not a weakness. It's actually one of your biggest strengths. You just have to take power over that. Not be ashamed, to remove the shame, to be able to look at somebody and be like, I'm not okay today. How many of us have asked somebody, hey, how are you? In passing. Are we really asking, how are you? I think I personally would love to see more people just stop and listen. How are you? Things aren't going so well today. Can I give you a hug? Or I'm sorry that's happening to you. Just that acknowledgement, rather than that having to be always like, it's okay. I can remember Chester learning that this was a specific moment in time. We were on tour. We had just gotten on the plane, and we always rode together. It was Mike and Dave and Chester, and my sweet husband. He was always complaining about his back, his neck, his whatever. This is very Chester. But
throw up.
Yeah. So he was extra sensitive, and he had asked. Dave had asked, how are you, or something, or how you been, or something like that. So Chester goes on to one of his quite long conversations. Those of us that knew him knows he just loved to talk. But at some point, Dave, naturally kind of zoned out. And I remember speaking to him afterwards, and his feelings were really hurt. He didn't really want to know how I was. And that, to me, was very insightful, because that was Chester's perception of that question. My perception was very different. I thought Dave actually was listening to him, and Chester went on and on. But it made me aware and really start to realize how often you're asked, how are you? And then somebody turns away, and they're really not listening. So, yeah, it's just another thing. I think that the interpersonal connection, we're all people, we're not always all okay. And, raise your hand in here if you've had a bad day in the last week, right? Like,
bad
just
day.
a really bad day,
Yeah,
right?
Tonight.
I'm going to raise both. So.
Yeah.
Can I tell a story about, the how are you factor? Yeah, I told you in the intro that, he was at the best that he's ever been. And I'm sharing this with you because, in the immediate aftermath, I know I evaluate and still do. What did I miss? What could I have done? Why didn't I see that? And, you know, here we are now trying to talk about the things that you can do and what can you look for. And I don't think it's ever going to be a universal sign. But he, as I said, he had our guard down. Probably not intentionally. He was at the best of his game. He was really in the right place. Of all of the years I'd spent with him, he was in his best place.
I mean, there were plenty of times in the past, I don't know, I said 20 years that we'd known him, where we did, Mike and I did have conversations about what if he overdoses? What if, you know, he's not doing well, he's really depressed, I don't know what's going to go on. And before he died, there was none of that. We knew Chester's funny little quirks. It was things like talking too fast, or the way his eyes would kind of like not look into you, kind of like look. There were just these little funny things that we all knew about Chester, and there wasn't signs this time.
Well, I was going to share a story about a moment I think I missed. Of course, it's hindsight, right? But we were at the London O2, and we had a film crew there for that night. They were going to shoot the show. They did shoot the show. And Mike had asked me to ask Chester had been wearing his sunglasses more often than not, right, T? I mean, they would not come off. And Mike asked me, and I knew what he really meant when he asked. He said, "Can you ask Chester to take his sunglasses off tonight, because he emotes through his eyes. We want to see that fury in his eyes. We want the cameras to capture that." So I knew that I was being asked to be the messenger. So of course that's my job. I'm going to go do it. So I find Chester in a moment just before he takes the stage, and he's getting himself all psyched up, and I put my arm around him as I normally do, and I go, "Hey man, I just want to remind you that tonight they're going to be shooting the show. They got those high-def cameras out there, and they're going to get really tight on you, and it's going to be amazing. And man, if we can see your eyes for this, it's going to change the world, because they're going to capture all that emotion coming out of your eyes." And I spun it as hard as I could, as positively as I could, so sure that the message was going to come through, and he's going to take the sunglasses off. And he went, "Fuck you." That was really weird. That was so out of character for him to do that. I missed that moment. Now, maybe not. Maybe that wasn't a sign. But that goes through my head every day, that was a sign that I missed. So look for those things.
Jump in and say I think all of us have gone through those moments of, what did I miss? Is there anything that I could have said or done differently? And there's something really important that we all need to acknowledge, is that if you do have someone who you loved who died by suicide, the bottom line is the only person who can save that person is themselves, right? We can be a community, and we can provide as many resources and as much love as possible, but I can't save Talinda. Talinda can't save me. So it's really important that if you have things going on with your mental health, that you're acknowledging it and you're coming up with a plan. When I start to slip, I know what my plan is, and I get on top of it pretty quickly, because I know that once I slip, I'm sliding quickly. And so definitely there is, as a community, support, try and help each other. But there's also, if you are in that position where you are having mental health problems, you need to recognize it, and you need to start moving forward and come up with your contingency plan if you start to slip.
Yeah. And as Chester's wife, of course there are, I can only imagine the things that have gone through my head. What did I miss? What could I have done? As much as social media has been a huge support for me, I do every now and then get people blaming me, straight up blaming me for him dying, for not saving him, for mistreating him, or who knows why these people behind their devices are saying these horribly cruel things to me. But you know, it is a little stab in the heart. But what I have to remember is that it's not my fault. It's not my children's fault. It's not the band's fault. It's nobody's fault.
Not Chester's fault.
Not Chester's fault.
Yeah,
No, it's not a fault. It's years of untreated mental health, which led to substance abuse, which led to unhealthy relationships, which, you know, by the time I met him, he was ready to be healthier. You can, you know, to that, understand that. And so I just, my message I want to say to you is you have to be responsible for your own health. It's okay. Please reach out to those you love. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to be who you want to be. And I'm still learning that. I'm still going through that. Of course, I have my moments, you know, of, you know, what could I have done differently? You know, our sweet son blames himself. He says, Mom, we shouldn't have gone on our trip. Dad would still be here. And that breaks my heart. And that's his journey to understand that it's not his fault either. And so I don't know if any of you can relate, or if any of you have lost a loved one to suicide, or know of anybody that's self-harmed. But you can do so much, but you can only do so much. And the best thing to do is to be an example of taking care of yourself, because others do look to you. They do look to you for love and support.
I just want to say something, and then I know Joey's going to ask me a question too, that hopefully maybe will be helpful as we sort of think about this. But I want to respond to the trying to figure out what I could have done, what I could have done, what I could have done. That process is such a universal experience that our brains, Anna was talking about how our brains try to protect us. They do it all the time in all kinds of ways, sometimes that are really healthy and some that are not. You know, you can deny, right? You know, people deny that they have issues they need to address. That's our brain trying to protect us because we don't want to look at it. We feel ashamed. We feel embarrassed. Another thing our brains do is we don't want to accept something that's painful. It's painful. Why would we want to accept it? Why would we want to feel it? So our brain tries to undo it. Your brain goes through the what if I had done this? What if I had seen that? I mean, I haven't heard that piece about that Jim said about Chester and not wanting to take his sunglasses. He was communicating something. You know, we'd have to kind of have him to ask what all the pieces are, but the fact that you think maybe there was something there probably was. But you're trying to go back and undo it. Our brains try to undo it. Tyler's trying to undo it so that he doesn't feel it because it's wicked painful. It's unbearable. So that's something to kind of tuck in there to help people who are with you in your lives when something tragic happens. That's our brain trying to undo as if we can. It's the magical thinking that we all get into so that we don't hurt.
It's an automatic response too, right? It's a motor function.
Yes.
It's not something you can turn on and turn off.
No, and one of the guys that I spoke to, the therapist from the Players Association, taught me a couple of things. And one of them was the humans have the fight or flight mechanism like animals, but animals don't beat themselves up repeatedly for the same thing over and over.
I think that's the reticular activation system.
Yeah, we humans are the only species that ruminate. They're the only species that go back to the past. And what I learned for myself, and I think it holds true for many people, that depression is the regret of the past and anxiety is the fear of the future. And I kind of came to terms with that. And I want to give people here some tangible kind of action steps. You're the expert. You deal with this all the time. What do you do when you start feeling this way? Like, what's the first thing that you do?
Well, I mean, thank you for that. And I think we're all of you are experts too. You all know yourselves. You know the people you love. If you tune in, you can recognize those signs. And again, we, in our work together, in our organization, we're trying to help people recognize basic signs that all of us can know. We know the signs of a heart attack. We all know them. If Joey started to complain of chest pain and clutch at his chest, say, I have my chest pain, and he's sweating, we would all say, gee, maybe he's having a heart attack. Now, it could be a panic attack. Those two look alike, but we would do something. We would take action. If I have a toothache tomorrow, if my tooth starts to hurt, it's a sign that something is not right. Now, it could be that something's stuck and it's not really a cavity or whatever, but I would do something. So if there's one thing that all of us can do, it's pay attention to things about yourself or people you love that you can do and recognize, I'm in pain, I'm hurting. Translate the diagnosis, the labeling, the judging, the shaming. It's pain. We're in pain. And so people can recognize for themselves. They can recognize people they care and love, their spouses, their partners. They can encourage healthy habits. Figure out what works for you. Figure out what makes you feel that high in a good way. I swim. I used to run, then my knees started to go, and I was like, okay, I can't do that anymore. So I found swimming, meditation, gardening, whatever is your thing, do it. And make yourself accountable. Hold yourself accountable. That's why, the Fitbit, we're starting to talk about how we can, work with different technology to help it be positive. Wouldn't it be great if the Fitbit, if you're listening out there, the Fitbit...
I got one better for you. Go ahead.
Want to give your phone number out or
there
anything?
There you go, see? But we can use technology. I'm going to tell you something about technology that's really scary and really upsetting. There was a study recently that showed us that there's been an increase in suicide among girls, young girls, directly correlates with social media. Whoa, it gives me chills. I have 2 daughters. I am not surprised by that at all. Social media cuts both ways. Talinda has used social media to help heal people who were hurting. So we can use technology. You can use technology in a positive way. And if it's not helpful, you turn it off. So learn what works for you and try some. Therapy is actually, I think every human being on the planet should have a good therapist. It feels great. It feels great to have somebody who's there focused on you and helping you on your journey. I used to say to people when I was doing primarily therapy, I'm the tour guide on your journey. And our job is that at some point you don't need me anymore because you got it. And you're on that journey. Come in and check in when you want. It's a positive. It's a strength. It's not a weakness.
And that social media is bidirectional as well, too, because the fans started feeding back to Talinda and the band, and they were uplifting us as a result of it. I wanted to ask you, we at the ESA advocate that all touring crew and everybody, hopefully at Live Nation as well, are getting CPR training, AED training, and first aid training. It's good business. You need to know these things, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time or cost a whole lot of money. But I'm hearing now that there's mental health awareness training as well, mental health first aid training as well, and that should be in the docket of things that we have as professionals also. We all should have it because we're working in a highly volatile situation where we probably see this a little more frequently than the average Joe, and having that on the list of things that we have to ask of our staff and ask of those around us who work on tour with us is a good idea in my mind.
It is a good idea. And, the work that we're doing through Change Direction is public health. Everybody can learn those signs. Everybody, like heart health, everybody can learn healthy habits. Mental health first aid, which came out of Australia, is a wonderful program that people in industries or anybody who just wants to can take it and learn how not only to recognize signs, but to be a better listener, to be more empathic. These are all great skills. And we know that emotional intelligence, which is what all of this is, it's good for you no matter what your job, no matter who you're married to, no matter what your kids end up being. It's just literacy. It's basic literacy. And so do yourself a favor and educate yourself and share it. Share the joy. And learn more, and it'll help you in life.
I was saying before we got up here, and we only have a couple more minutes, and then Sam, we got to get the crisis information, and then we'll wrap up and we'll take some questions. But the UK has appointed a minister of loneliness.
Yes.
Which, when I read that, I just was taken.
A
I was
very
just like,
British
whoa.
way to say
It's
that.
very British. I'm the minister of loneliness. Like who?
And that doesn't mean he's encouraging
No,
loneliness.
but just the thought that, and the UK was kind of notoriously behind in mental wellness 15 years ago, and they seem to kind of have jumped ahead. So it's obviously a topic that's top of mind for so many people. But you said you worked with the Obama administration. Tell us about some of the things that you did and some of the successes, perhaps, that you had.
So when we realized, there was reference earlier, I talked a little bit about how we started working with service members and military, and that's a community that has that same intense high.
22 a day. To
Well,
suicide.
yes, but they also often are caught in that cycle of getting really, really up and then having nowhere to go. So that's part of that suicide epidemic that we're working on. But the Obamas were very, very passionate about caring for those who serve in their families. And so that was some of the work that I had the honor and privilege of doing with them. And as we started to look at, well, how are we going to ensure their health and well-being, that was when the idea for Change Direction came, those cool posters out there that I see. I love those. Those are the 5 signs. So it was First Lady Michelle Obama who joined us in Washington, D.C. to launch the campaign to change direction. And she got up on stage and she talked about there should be no difference in our physical health and our mental health. You wouldn't say to somebody who has cancer, suck it up, get over it. Why is that so? It's like, why do we do that with somebody who's hurting emotionally? Then that turned into working with Prince Harry, who did a PSA for us. He's an amazing, amazing young man, and he and his brother and sister-in-law have picked up the mantle from Princess Diana of compassion, of caring. So now, speaking of the UK, in October, we're going to be doing a global summit, the second global summit on mental health culture change, and I'm proud to say that Talinda is going to be with us there for that 3-day event. The last day of that 3-day summit is going to be a concert. And we're very excited that we've been having some conversations with Live Nation about partnering, working with us on that. Hopefully this will even make it more likely.
If it doesn't, we're in trouble.
Hint, hint.
So let me just say that Live Nation supported a concert that Chris Stapleton did for us in Washington, D.C. It was amazing working with Live Nation. It was just magic. So that work with the UK at the Royal Foundation, we know we're going to have a whole lot of people there elevating that conversation, this conversation, as Talinda said, you're all part of that. So we look forward to working more with Live Nation and to keeping this conversation going.
I think we have to give some information now, if you guys want to come up. Or Jim, you got something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to leave everybody with something we've been saying lately, and we borrowed it from Maya Angelou, and that is that you do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, you do better, right? So right now we're trying to know better, and we're doing the best we can with what we've got. So thank you for listening. Sorry, I don't want to, you go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you guys all for sharing, and think of some questions, and we'll come back after this, and we'll take some of your questions for a few minutes, and then we'll wrap up.
So before we go to taking some questions, we wanted to just bring you back to some of the information that we have to support you. This is such an important conversation, but we don't want anyone to be launched into the January winter that we are living through right now without some things that you can take away with you. It's a beautiful winter. Look
But
look at all these
as
people.
I love
a
snow,
side
Jim.
note,
Quiet.
I am the person who needs vitamin D, and that does really affect
It's
my
real.
mood.
It's absolutely real. Yes.
So if you're like me, take your vitamin D over the winter, because otherwise, yeah.
Well, there's actually, I mean, people joke, but there really is. It's seasonal affective disorder is a real live thing that some people are very prone to. And so there, again, things you can do. But if you don't know it's real, you try to say, oh no, it's just me. But no, it's because it's dark and dreary and our bodies need stuff they're not getting. Sorry.
They absolutely do. So we've wanted to draw your attention to changedirection.org. This is a great place to find information. I'm going to hand things over to Jim because I'm only capable of managing things with one hand at a time and holding a mic. As you leave, there are bags ready for you as you go down the stairs. I think that's where they still are, right? I want to encourage you to take one. This information may not be something that you need right now for yourself, but please do take it so you have it on hand if you feel that something has come up where you need to seek support, or someone who you love, friends, family, coworker, that you want to help guide them towards some help. Ace Piva from Over the Bridge has put together a whole list of different types of information that you can access. Because as Anna was saying, it's very individual. It's not going to be the same thing that helps every person. So we want you to have a whole variety of resources that you can look into.
And can I just speak to Ace Piva's work? What we find is that if someone, a lot of people who get touched by these moments really closely activate and do something, and do whatever they can from the ground up, just as like the organizations in this room tonight. And ACE, I just learned tonight, is collecting data from artists in evaluation of, may I speak to this for you, Ace? Or you want to come up and speak to it? Or can we do that for a minute since it's important? Or are we
yeah,
going to
of
do
course.
That later?
No,
Yeah.
we got time.
This
Ace,
is
come
really
on up here.
This is really impressive, the Over the Bridge
Ace, pick it up a little bit. You're a little slow moving.
Foundation. Come on, Ace, double time.
Jog.
Over the Bridge, right, Ace?
Over the
So
bridge.
he's
I'm going to
invested-
hand you my microphone and step out of the way.
So good. I'll let you tell the story.
Hey, everybody. So Over the Bridge, we've been working on a research that measures musicians' post-performance mood response. And what post-performance mood response. So as we know, artists go through, all right. As we know, musicians go through a lot of emotional up and downs while performing. When you perform, you play well, you connect well, your emotions are high. As Jim mentioned, the serotonin and dopamine levels go up through the roof. And then afterwards, there's different performance outcomes. You connect with the crowd, but you may not play so well. You, maybe play well, but you don't connect with the crowd. And then on the bottom is, well, you don't connect and you didn't play so well. So those are some of the things that we are looking to discover. What their mood response is after a performance, and then what they do to manage those feelings. In an industry where substance use is normalized and glamorized, people use to celebrate the moments or to cope with the moments. So we've been able to collect data from over 3,200 musicians from around the world, and we're in the process of analyzing that data right now. So hopefully soon enough we'll be able to spread what we've learned. And before we could educate, we need to learn. We need to collect the data. And moving forward, Over the Bridge, we're going to be doing more sort of research stuff so we could help keep giving out educational material to everybody in our industry. There's not a lot of research done when it comes to mental health and addictions issues, whether it be substance use or abuse or whatnot. So we're here. We're going to be continuing doing this research and get this information out to our industry. And that's about it.
What I think is so impressive about it is that Ace was moved by a moment that's caused him to do this. But unlike some of us others who have done other things to try to help, we're collecting actual metrics, measurable moments that will help to evaluate how to treat, right? That's the goal and that's the help. And that nobody that I know of was doing that. Who would have thought to ask an artist, did you have a good show? Because they're always going to tell you yes, but that's really important, especially if they know the gravity of what you're attempting to do. And I think it would be interesting for you to devise a mechanism to measure those same metrics for those in the support role of those crews. The Live Nation execs, the touring team, all the folks who are in the trenches, in the moment. Let's expand that research potentially and ask a similar set of questions to perhaps help the rest of the
And if I might, when you're ready and you've got stuff to share, we will help share it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, research helps change culture because research gives us information. Information is powerful, and then information changes the culture. When the culture changes, more funding and more opportunity is driven to do more research. So that's a beautiful circle, and we're happy to help.
Oh, thank you very much.
I have a quick question for you on this. Are you also doing research into reentry back into civilian or home life? Because I know, when you're on the road, there is a certain thing going on during that, and then you come back home, and suddenly Mike's got 3 kids who
Take out the trash.
take out the
Laundry
trash, do your
and
laundry,
pay your phone bill.
take care of the
Kids to
kids,
school.
and it's
the maid's not going to clean my room?
it's a very different. It's a different type of lifestyle, and some people enjoy going out on the road to get away. Some people, it's hard for them to be out on the road.
Well, that's primarily the reason behind this study, is because there's a term that came up a few times, or a lot of times while I've been on the road, is post-show or post-tour depression. Like you get the dopamine levels and all that going, but when you get home, you got to deal with life stuff, family, and if someone who's into substance using, you could become pretty sneaky at it. So when you get home, and if you're able to hide it from a road crew of 20 people, it's a lot easier when you get home when you just got, family and a few young ones. So, but before we're able to come up with ways to combat the post-tour depression, is we need to identify first, that post-performance or post-tour depression is a real thing. So once we're able to identify it, then we could learn how to combat that. So yes.
I think part of that is you have to say it to yourself. Okay, I'm going to be going away. You have to say it to yourself. I'm going to be going away. I have to transition my brain from this spot to this spot so that I can be at my best on this away game. And now as you approach coming home, I think what we've seen in the past, and certainly with Chester, there was this anxiety about having to transition, and that made him even more combative to it. But one other mechanism there is to say, all right, you know what, I'm going to be home in 5 days. Let me start getting myself settled down. And you can actually talk yourself through these things. It's how we've raised our children to not have anxiety about me going away to work. And we've done that by more or less gamifying. 7 days before I go, I start talking about it. My wife starts talking about it. I'm going to be going away. Let's find where I'm going on a map. My daughter's making notes for me and sticking them in my suitcase. And we do these things to normalize the fact that Daddy goes away. And then then we do a countdown calendar when I'm coming home.
And those are all healthy habits that you've learned, and you're now teaching them to your kids,
right,
which is great.
Right. So I think part of what the touring world misses is a lot of the stress is I'm going home. I don't know what my next gig is, or I'm going home and I'm high strung and I don't have the mechanisms to talk myself down there. And I think it's a conversation with yourself that the season's coming to an end at the shed, right, Tex? I gotta be somebody else for the winter time. Yeah, that sounds to me not so much of a metric study as it is what are the coping mechanisms? What are the mechanisms we use to tell ourselves to get us in the right space so when we go home? Now, drugs are a different story altogether, but the problem exists even in a sober environment where you still have to make that transition and you still have to be, like I might as well put a guest sticky on myself when I'm at home. My wife's the production manager. She's in charge. I'm a guest in the house, and I'm the most disruptive thing that ever walks into that house. And I don't intend to be, but that's how it is. But by recognizing that, I try to keep everything, in its box that she's set up for us when we're at home.
Just don't mess things up when you come home.
That's right.
We've got it down.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's wrap. We're going to wrap up here. And do you have any more information that you want to give before we do?
Sorry, Joey,
okay.
I do. And part of it is to just draw attention to, this is Joey's list. So in your bags, we have tips for mental health and wellness. These aren't just off the internet. These are things that work for a real human being. And I think that's amazing. And he's sharing it with all of you guys. So And the other thing that's in your package is green. This is how you can arrange to have a mental health first aid course for a group of your own choosing. Just contact Carolyn. She can help set it up. We've all learned how to put on a Band-Aid. I know Jim and I have both talked about this, that we feel this is the next thing that we want to have in our own personal toolbox. We want to do the right thing, and we want to have a little coaching on how to do it. All right, so I believe this is where our streaming...
We unceremoniously sent Ace off the stage. I think you should get a wrap.
Yes, please to Ace.
Thanks, Ace.
Thank you, Ace. This is where our streaming ends.
I would like to say one more thing before we stop streaming. Shortly before Chester passed, he received this dog tag from a veteran. And on it says, "Without courage, wisdom bears no fruit." And that, I found this after he passed, at a time when I needed to hear it the most. So I just wanted to pass that to you. Now you know, we've shared wisdom with you, but it takes courage. It takes courage. And I wish the courage for each and every one of you to take care of yourself.
Thank you, Talinda.
Yeah. So we're going to end our stream now. And we're going to take questions.
Yes. Before we take questions, I'm so sorry. I'm interrupting the flow of all this fantasticness, but we wanted to have a few ground rules. All right?
Thank God you're here. I suck at rules.
Pardon?
I'm horrible with rules.
Are you horrible with, or maybe Barbara wants to do rules. We're going to now open up to questions, but we wanted to make sure that we just give you a reminder about respecting people's privacy and confidentiality, and